This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 227 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is meaningful interactions with locals. I know that I am definitely not alone in really loving getting to know local people when I travel. It's so much more meaningful and in-depth than just seeing, the famous sightseeing spots or staying at a big hotel where you don't really get to talk to anyone, or, just kind of doing your own thing and not really getting to engage with any local people. There's just so many wonderful experiences that come out of, really trying to intentionally be able to engage with locals. So I've got three guests today who've had some really widely varied experiences with local people, all positive, but widely varied in the kind of ways that they've got access to local people or engaged with them, and just different experiences that I hope will inspire you to think about how you can have more meaningful interactions with locals when you travel. I think I've probably mentioned before that my most meaningful way is to actually live in a foreign country. The more foreign the better, as in not English speaking. They're my favourite kind of places to live, and I hope to do it again someday too. But when I lived there, I lived in Japan and Slovakia and Germany, and it's not always easy to meet local people, but every time you make the effort, it's just wonderful. So I will start off today's episode with Tasha Goldberg, and Tasha talks about an experience meeting local people, and in particular one local person who proved very inspiring to her. And she has the good fortune to travel a lot with her work, and this interaction came out of a work trip to Kenya.
I had traveled to Nairobi for work, and one of my best friends is Kenyan, and so she and I planned a little holiday after work to go to Lamu Island, which is an incredibly beautiful paradise just off the coast of Kenya. And I met a man there who was so inspiring. He basically was this ninth generation builder. His family for 9 generations built traditional Swahili dhows or sailboats.
Wow.
And he had noticed this increasing plastic pollution in Lamu, which was, it was particularly devastating because of the way that these, currents in the oceans, there are 5 main gyres or currents. And so in Kenya, they have received plastic waste not only from what they produce, but that comes in off of the currents from around other countries and other places. And it was devastating to him. But what he did was that he became very proactive. He collected the plastic waste, and he came up with a solution where he could melt it and create post-consumer plastic lumber. And he built a Swahili dhow completely out of the plastic waste that he found on his shores.
Wow.
And he and I have maintained a friendship over years and years and years now. And I've gone back and made an episode of Evidence of Hope about his story. But wow. Even after that video is complete, he really genuinely inspired me. Is somebody that I continue to admire. His work is beautiful and continues, and we exchange messages on WhatsApp, and he shares with me what's going on and updates, but he also just shares uplifting, positive energy. Like during the beginning of the pandemic, he sent me a beautiful video of a young man singing, just these. We're friends. We're not just, and it has been really incredible. And when I would go back to visit, I've been back to Lamu a few times since the first visit. And the thing that's so amazing is that, I remember the first time I returned to Lamu after it was my second visit, there's a boat that takes you from the airport. You have to cross a part of the ocean to get to the island where you're staying, or where I was staying. And as my boat was coming in, the boys that were selling, jewelry on the, like, to the tourists, like, there's a group of Maasai men and boys that are selling their jewelry, and they recognized me. And so before my boat even came, they were like, "Hi, Tasha, you're back. All right, welcome.
Aww.
Welcome back. We were wondering when you would come again." And there's, a little girl that I met in the neighborhood who I just thought was so special. We took a picture 2 years earlier. We saw each other again, and it was like, it was exciting. We recognized each other. And so sometimes those friendships are very fleeting and just like very small and short times together. And sometimes it's like this long, ongoing relationship, but they are, these friendships are like the honey of life. They make everything so wonderfully sweet, and I'm very grateful.
Being open to making new friends when you travel, like Tasha did, is certainly one wonderful way to have ongoing meaningful interactions with locals in the different places that you travel. Great story. I loved it. Now, my next guest today is Lindy Alexander, and she has an example of another great way that you can make contact with local people, and that's through taking a class or a workshop. And I know myself, I've done this quite a few times, in all sorts of different classes in different places. It can be a really intriguing way to get to know some local people. You're there for, at least a couple of hours or more. I remember a really quirky one in Japan, in Kobe. I got to make a little music box, and it was at a funny little museum up in the hills behind Kobe, and, got to chat to the people there as we did it. It was kind of an unusual experience, and not even typically Japanese, but it was just a wonderful way to get to chat to the locals. I think just a couple of days before that, I'd had a more traditional sushi making class in Osaka, which was just as wonderful and also delicious. Speaking of cooking classes, that's exactly what Lindy did when she went to Thailand, but it was certainly a cooking class with a difference, and a really intriguing way to meet some local people that you probably wouldn't meet in other circumstances.
So I went to Thailand with Urban Adventures, and as part of that trip, I did a cooking class with the Courageous Kitchen, and I didn't know anything about the Courageous Kitchen before. So basically it was set up by an African-American guy called Dwight Turner, and he was from Atlanta. He went to Thailand and wanted to teach English. And while he was teaching English, one of his students invited him back to her house. And he went back and he just saw this family living in basic squalor and couldn't really understand why they were so hungry. I mean, because there's street food stalls on every street, every corner in Bangkok, right? And so he was like, "Why do you not have anything to eat?" And so Alina, this girl, started telling him her story, that she was a refugee from northern Vietnam, and so she was from the Hmong tribe and had been persecuted for being Christian, and so had fled to Thailand, to Bangkok. And I don't think she had totally realised that because Thailand aren't a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, that they really have no rights there. So you're not allowed to work and you're not allowed to study. So she was attending this English class totally illegally.
Oh, wow.
And that even if you do have refugee status, even if that status is granted to you, you can be deported or arrested at any time because you can't be resettled in Thailand. Oh. And so what Dwight found out was that there's this huge network. I mean, I think somewhere I read there's something like 200,000 urban refugees in Bangkok. This huge number of people who are kind of living in the shadows. And he was like, okay, I'm not going back to Atlanta. I'm going to start some sort of non-profit charity if I can. And so that's how I came across him. And so he does cooking classes, and Alina had become one of his kind of instructors. So she had learnt English and was teaching people how to cook traditional Thai food, and she kind of had a pathway, but her story was devastating because her sister had been kidnapped on the way into Thailand.
Wow.
And they don't know where she is, and they think maybe she's been trafficked. And her brother had been arrested, and so he had been in jail for the last 8 years, and her dad had been arrested the month before we met her.
Oh, gosh.
So, like, just a devastating story. Yet she taught us how to cook these traditional Thai dishes, which were so beautiful. So, like this beetle leaf, I don't know, like a little parcel almost, with galangal and lemongrass and peanuts and lime and chili. And so she taught us how to do this.
Yum.
And another, it was so good. And another dish called kratong tong, which is kind of like if you imagine an open clam shell and a really delicate pastry that is then filled with grilled mushrooms and crumbled tofu and a chili sauce and coriander, and you just kind of put it in your mouth all at once, and it's this explosion of kind of spicy and crunchy and sour, and it's the best of Thai food. So we spent this afternoon cooking at Dwight's house while we were surrounded by these narratives of these two girls who had had these really traumatic experiences but had managed to find support through Courageous Kitchen.
Oh, that's very special. It's so much more than just a cooking class. It's
not your usual making pad thai.
No, no. I mean, and we often talk about the way you can get to know the local people, and that's just a classic example that the cooking is almost a byproduct. And, what you really probably gain most out of is that insight into those, the lives of those people, like, who you don't even know. Like, I never even knew that those refugees existed, that was such an issue. And, I love that. It's amazing. Does he have other staff that he's working with? How big is this whole Courageous Kitchen setup?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. So they do cooking classes and they do food tours. He was saying also that he often goes back to Atlanta for a few months at a time, works as like a line chef in a restaurant or a summer camp, raises money and then comes back. Mm-hmm. And he was married to a Thai woman as well. But I think, and they're supporting English classes and really doing everything they can. And he's helping people with their applications for refugee status as well.
Wow.
So it's huge. I mean, it's not just work for him. This is his whole life.
Yeah. He's dedicated. Oh, that's amazing. Wow. I love that story. It's we talk so much about trying to find those local stories and really understand what's beneath the surface of a place, and that's such a good example. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, I had never heard about those urban refugees. I knew nothing about it. And why would you? If you're a traveller, you wouldn't necessarily see that side of Bangkok. And, yeah, I felt so grateful because, these girls were really, like, they're very vulnerable too, because actually what he's doing is, he's supporting people who, in the eyes of the law shouldn't be there and are illegal, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
So he's taking a risk, and they're taking a risk by telling their stories too.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of trust involved. It's, yeah.
Absolutely.
Very special experience. I love this example of Lindy's because it's not just getting to engage with local people, but getting to engage with really marginalised local people that you probably don't usually get to learn about or meet, and then you can have kind of a meaningful impact on their lives as well. It just really ticks all the boxes for me. I actually went online to look at the Courageous Kitchen's website, and I found that during COVID times, they're now also offering online cooking classes through the Airbnb Experiences platform. So I'm going to leave a link in the show notes, and I have already decided I will do one myself. They're very reasonably priced and they sound fabulous. So it's not quite as good as being in person in Thailand, but at the moment it's a great second choice, I think. Now, my final guest today is Penny Walker, who has lived in the Pyrenees in France for quite some years now. So she has kind of is a local herself when she has people come to look around the Pyrenees, but she also has had very interesting experiences getting to know kind of the lifelong locals, I suppose. So it was really interesting to chat to Penny about tapping into local knowledge in the Pyrenees.
And the best way to get a real local experience is to tap into local knowledge. Tap into the information and the details that a local expert can give you. Somebody, well, like myself, who's lived in an area for 13, nearly 14 years now. Obviously, I know the area like the back of my hand. The Pyrenees is an area that people don't really know about, and it's probably not even an area that's on their radar. You talk about the mountain environment in France. Everybody thinks of the Alps. Everybody will go to the Alps, and they have no idea about the Pyrenees and about the special nature of this mountain range and how authentic the area is. And for me, the most interesting thing about the Pyrenees is the gastronomy. The food is absolutely incredible. The cheeses, you would not believe the variety of cheeses that we have in the Pyrenees. It's the sheep's milk cheeses, the cow's milk, the goat's cheeses. You have every kind of cheese you can possibly imagine. And it's not only just cheese, it's aged cheese, it's fresh cheese, it's different textured cheese, different flavored cheeses, mixtures of cheeses. I have to say, I am a bit of a cheese addict. I've even taken out a loyalty card with the sheep's farm that is just along the valley from us here, where they produce these amazing. Oh, exactly, the carte de fidélité, as they call it. I think that just tells you how much cheese I go through, And it's freshly produced on the premises. You can actually see the sheep, in the fields and also indoors at this time of year, obviously, because it's winter in Europe at the moment. And you can speak to the people who own the farm, the farmers who produce the cheeses. You can learn about the whole cheese producing process to find out, what goes into, in particular, used milk cheese. And believe me, it is a fascinating process.
Oh, I believe it, yeah.
It's
and there's something good at the other end of it because you get
exactly. To eat. Oh, my goodness, and how good is it? I think people don't really understand that cheese is a seasonal product. The flavour of cheese changes according to the time of year that the milk is produced. Right. So the milk, obviously, that comes from the ewes in the summer months, where they're feeding on the lush mountain pastures, has a completely different flavour to the milk and the cheeses that are produced in the autumn and the winter months, when they're fed on dry products and feed and they're kept indoors. And that has been one of the most enlightening things I think I have discovered during my time in the Pyrenees. Up until then, like so many people, you buy your packet cheese, don't you, from a supermarket, and it's just off the shelf and it's just a cheese. But the subtleties and the nuances of the flavour when you actually buy it fresh, locally from a farm or from a market, as most people do here, it really is enlightening, and it's one of the most delicious experiences that you can really have in the Pyrenees.
That sounds amazing. And I think that's quite a common trend these days, is to be able to get local ideas and local kind of knowledge via food and food-related tours and, kind of meet the maker kind of situations, which I am all for, because A, you get to hear some interesting local stories, and B, you get to eat. I love to eat. Now, what about some other ways that you can meet locals or get to know, how the locals live, or any other kind of local experiences around your way?
Yeah, the pastoral experiences are exceptional in the Pyrenees, in the Central Pyrenees. Like I mentioned, in the summer months, the sheep are taken up to the mountain pastures, where they spend normally June, July and August. And they feed off the fresh, lush mountain grass. And always there is a berger, a shepherd, who accompanies them up there, who looks after them, who oversees them with his dogs to make sure they're safe from, for example, attack by bears. Because we do have brown bears in the Central Pyrenees. I should mention that. They can be a threat to livestock. So the shepherd will spend the summer months up there with his dog to oversee the flock and to make sure that everything is safe and the sheep are okay. We work with some of the local shepherds here in the mountains to give people the experience of meeting these this pastoral community, the people who actually are immersed in the Pyrenees life, for whom this is a way of life. And it really is an incredible experience, because you can't really comprehend what the life of a shepherd is unless you actually go up into the mountains and meet them and talk to them. And the local guide that we work with is native to the area. He knows these particular shepherds as personal friends. He's able to give people an insight into the life of the shepherd, and obviously how tough it can be for them alone up there for weeks on end. It's fascinating to learn about the kind of person for whom this life is the best way of life. And certainly visitors that we welcome here, who go up into the mountains to have this experience, really do feel of it as a life-changing experience. It's a whole way of life that they really have got no concept of.
When I travel, I do really love getting to know people who live completely different lives from me. It's kind of always a reminder that we're all the same in many ways, even when we do live very different lives. And it's, it's just a fascinating thing for me. So apart from the talk of cheese making me hungry, I'm also now just desperate to sometime in the future meet the shepherds of the Pyrenees. It's just intriguing to hear about such lives that are so varied compared to mine. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode about meaningful interactions with locals. I hope that it inspires you when you travel to actively try and create these opportunities to have some of these, more meaningful interactions when we travel. It's really an enriching part of seeing the world, I think. It's not just seeing the world, but also seeing the world's people. I think it's really important and so much fun as well. So thank you very much to my guests for this episode. First up, I chatted with Tasha Goldberg. You can find out more about Tasha's work at her project Evidence of Hope website, which is at evidenceofhope.com. I then chatted with Lindy Alexander. Lindy runs a site called The Freelancers Year at thefreelancersyear.com, gives practical advice to freelance writers so that they can earn the money they deserve from their writing. And I'll also leave a link in the show notes to that online class from the Courageous Kitchen. And last but definitely not least, I chatted with Penny Walker of Adventure Creators. You can find out ways to get involved in her Pyrenees adventures by going to adventurecreators.com. Don't forget to come and chat with us at the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers. I'll leave a link in the show notes to that, or you can just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook. You will find us there. The show notes for this episode are at notaballerina.com/227. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.